Cool.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is episode 3 of our series on home growing with Gil Jones. Gil, take it away.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Yeah, so we're back here for session 3 out of 4. So today we're going to be talking about, we're calling it fueling your flowers. So today's going to be all the grow gear that you guys want to know about. And then we're going to talk about flipping to flower stage and what to expect there. So if you have any questions when you're growing, especially for patients, also for non-patients as well, check me out on Instagram, honeybeargrows, and then email me honeybeargrows@gmail.com. Just a little bit of a review about what we do in this series is, so I've been growing for just a few years now, since 2018, but I've just done the initial research. So especially regarding today's topic of grow gear, so that if you guys are intimidated about, hey, I need to plunk down this amount of money, but I don't know what to get, that's what we'll talk about today, so that you guys can get right to growing. Okay, so you can see in our 4 parts, we're on 3 here. So we're going to talk about tents, lights, and ventilation, which is very important. And then we'll talk about tuning in that gear to get your plants the best kind of habitat. And then we'll talk a little bit about nutrients and then flipping to flower. And then next session, we're going to talk about common issues that beginners run into, issues I've run into. And then we'll see when to harvest, how to dry it and cure the product. And then we'll also talk about some advanced topics that you guys might want to look into in the future beyond this. So throughout today's presentation, I'm going to be mentioning specific items for you to purchase and a couple prices, but I have a very full purchase schedule that I've put together ready to go. So what the purchase schedule is every single item that I've bought from the Hydro store, from Amazon, whatever. So it's every single item that you'll need, the prices that you can expect to pay, and then importantly, when you're going to need it. So for an example, a grow tent, you might not need until you're ready to flip to flower. Maybe you don't want to spend that $250 off the bat for a tent. So you can plan that purchase to be a month or 2 out, and that's what this purchase schedule is going to show you. So it's showing you money and time that you're going to spend on your grow. And so you can take a little bit of time to buy things and think about what you want to buy. So number 2 here is I've been working on what I'm calling a living cocoa blend. So it's a cocoa coir blend that incorporates a lot of good soil microbes and good biology. So the cocoa blend that I'm working on has given me a lot of success, especially with certain styles of irrigation. So it's been formulated to minimize cost and labor throughout your grow. So it's an improvement on water-only super soils, in my opinion, like some of the Michigan mix and other products. So it's a lot more beginner friendly, and all it's going to need is water all the way through veg. So if you want that recipe, you want to DM me on Instagram or email me directly and I'll send it to you. So I'm not charging anything for the recipe right now while it's in development, but as it progresses, I may begin to charge a small fee for it. So if you want to kind of get in on the recipe while it's available, I'd suggest hitting me up on email or Instagram, and I'll find a way to send it to you. What it does is it combines a lot of the benefits of cocoa coir that we have, like, for an example, an ideal air to water ratio. So it's hard to overwater your plant, which is a common problem. It also makes up other shortcomings that cocoa has as a soilless medium. So it has a very low cation exchange capacity. So we have some different amendments in that help to mitigate that issue. So it's good with continuous drip irrigation, or hand watering is fine. It's reusable from grow to grow. And then it's also going to be organic, and it's going to maintain a great microbial population. So if you want to give it a shot, just reach out. And my contact info is going to be on the bottom right through the presentation. Okay, so we'll check in on my one plant up there, but I've since the last run or since the last presentation, I've harvested my run of the 3 feminized autoflowers, which were the sour stomper. So I harvested them around day 80. They were all in cocoa coir, but I ran a comparison of liquid nutrients against my cocoa blend. And the living cocoa blend absolutely crushed the liquid nutrient run. So I was getting an extra 50% yield off of the living cocoa blend. So I would suggest giving it a shot if you're interested. I used blue mat irrigators, so they're just a type of automatic drip irrigator. So I actually didn't even have to water at all. They just kind of took care of it. They fed just pure water to the plants. And then what you can see over on the plant cam is going to be what I'm vegging out for next run. So we're about 3 months in on that. So that's also in living cocoa. And I'm gonna plan to transplant it into an earth box, which I have a cutaway here. It's a regular pot, but it just has a sub irrigation reservoir on the bottom. So I'm gonna try comparing that with blue mats, and I'm gonna try more of these sort of low tech irrigation automation systems, because I'm a big proponent of automation, but I don't like it to be too high tech. I talk about failure points. So that's one reason why like I'm not that into hydro and stuff, because some of that automation is awesome and can give you killer results, but if you have a power outage, you can have issues sometimes. Okay, so we'll get into the grow gear here. So your 3 options are going to be tents, closets, and grow rooms. So a closet is going to be fine for your first grow, but we want to be careful about light leaks. So personally, my closets would have light leaks. You might be able to hang like a big drape or something in your closet to protect against light leaks, but you're going to have to be very careful. So I would only suggest using a closet through veg. If you can use it through flower and you're not going to have light leaks, totally go for it. You're going to save a lot of money. And if you can get decent airflow through there with fans, I think a closet is a great option to get started. It's going to take up less space and cost you less. So if you have light leaks, it's basically going to cause a little bit of hormonal confusion with your plants. And down the line can lead to seeds and less potency for your grow. So we don't want that. If you have a grow room that you can close off, that you can get totally clear of light leaks, you should be good with a grow room. So a lot of larger growers might say take a spare bedroom or a large bathroom or something like that, and they'll hang up either white kind of tarp called panda paper, or they might hang mylar sheets. So that we can get that same kind of good reflection going on. They make reflective paint as well. So we're also trying to keep out any kind of bugs that might be in your house, especially during the summertime. And we're trying to make the air conditioning more efficient. So if you only have to ventilate and air condition that small space, that contained space, it's going to be a lot more efficient than just running something, open in your house. So our understanding is that even if you have several pinhole light leaks in your tent or in your closet or whatever, that can cause pollen to be released down the line. So I would advise you to be really cautious about that. Okay. So I'll jump into a question real quick here because I think we should have time. So if I have a plant I like, can I use light leaks to create more seeds? You can. There are more advanced methods and more careful methods to doing that. Hypothetically, you could, yeah, but you're going to want to look into using colloidal silver, or I believe it's STS. I'm forgetting the name of the compound, but there are silver compounds that come from the cucumber industry, where it takes a female plant and causes it to produce pollen. and then you would then pollinate your female with that. If you're doing it with light leaks, it can be, you can spread pollen through the room and it's a little bit less controlled and a little bit less careful. But you definitely could use it. I haven't heard of it being done though. Okay. So if you get a seeded batch, yeah, you are gonna lose quality there. So a lot of times what people do to mitigate that is they'll take a bag and they'll just pollinate one branch. So you'll get your pollen, you'll put that in with one branch, you'll cover the whole thing with a bag, you'll shake it all around, and then you'll know that that branch is going to produce seeds while the rest of everything is protected. If you do it very carefully, you can get, best of both worlds going on. All right. Cool. Yeah, thanks for that question. All right. Oh, by the way, this is, I'm running a 4x4 tent now. I just got, this is an AC Infinity tent. So it's 4 foot by 4 foot by 6.5 feet tall. So it's $150. I'm not in love with it because there are some pinhole light leaks around these like sort of drawstring gasket type deals that you can see in here. So like some of the sewing they have to work on. It's one of their first tents. So I'm gonna have to duct tape that. But it's only $150 if you're interested. I would generally point you in the direction of Gorilla Grow tents, but they're twice the price. So there's also an AC Infinity promo code from Growcast. So if you put in Growcast15, it's just 15% across the board forever. Okay. So we'll talk about light selection here. So we have a lot of growers start with what we call blurple lights. So it's blue and red LEDs give you purple or this bluish purple color that you can see here. So this is kind of the first generation of LED grow lights that got released. This would be, if you saw this color on your neighbor's attic, you knew they were growing, right? So, all right, so I ran my first run, a friend gave me one, and I think they're pretty great for your first run. The only downside really is gonna be A, efficiency, and B, some people take issue with it makes it hard to see what color your plant is, but you can just flip on a light and take a look, get your phone camera out. No big deal. So these guys, I'm not going to recommend a certain brand to you because there seem to be a rotating list of brands that are selling them on Amazon for like 50 bucks. They're made overseas. They are a bit less efficient. Definitely be looking at reviews on them before you get it. Get one that people seem to be happy with. Okay, so they have little PC fans on the top. So that's one potential failure point. So you just want to make sure that those fans don't fail. Sometimes those bearings can go bad. Okay, this whole time I'm going to be talking about LED lights, but I'll give you a quick note on high pressure sodium, ceramic metal halide, and other conventional old school lights, sort of incandescent lights. I don't like these. I haven't used one, so take that with a grain of salt, but they get hot, they need constant ventilation, and they're inefficient. I think there's some risk of fire, but assess that for yourself if your ventilation were to go out. So a lot of great growers use them. A lot of great growers like the spectrum of them. I'm only going to recommend that you look into them if you're growing somewhere that's going to be cold year round, because you're adding heat, and heat is inefficiency unless you're making use of that heat. So if you're in a basement, think about it, but I wouldn't highly recommend them. Oh, so these blurple lights, I just put a little picture of the spectrum, I forgot. So this is the photosynthetically active radiation spectrum. So you can see like they kind of looked at this graph and they said like, okay, how can we approximate this to make it efficient for plants? And they just chopped out the blue section and the red section and they called it a day. I think it's not a bad idea for a first shot at LEDs. All right.
Gil, while we're on the topic, I have a question, and this might be totally out of the blue for your experience, but whatever resources you have, I would welcome. I've heard that light differences on the West Coast and East Coast impact the terpene profiles that these plants produce. Are you aware of that? Is there any kind of, has anybody tinkered with that to say, hey, if you put red spectrum lights on, you're going to get this, and if you put blue, you'll get that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's definitely documented, okay, so has the spectrum been documented to change the terpene profile? Not that I know of, but you do find folks talking about like the terroir of the plants these days, which we basically attribute to the light spectrum, the weather, and the soil microbiology. So I think that's definitely valid. I also think that like there are things about like say the latitude you're at and how many hours of sun you get per day that are going to make a difference. So I totally think that that is a possibility. There are folks that were playing around with they're called like plasma lights or something like that that would more that would better simulate the sun spectrum. And I think that was one of the things that people were chasing. So they were saying like, if you have like a Humboldt grown outdoor, can you simulate that inside? Maybe so. With Humboldt genetics, etc. There's also things like so what has been shown to be true has been the influence of UV radiation has been shown to increase the THC production. I'm sure you've heard about that a little bit. So some guys put in like a reptile light, or we're working on people sell like micro cells, like a one of those. It's like a black light, but it's like more intense, fluorescent bulb. And what else was I going to say? We have very good evidence about far red and blue light affecting like the shape of the plants. So like if you have more blue light, you're going to tend to get like the plant interprets it maybe as more like intense. So it's going to get a shorter space between the leaf sets. And then red, I'm blanking on what the effect of the far red is, but it's sort of emerging tech. So it's pretty cool stuff. Lighting is like an extremely complex and exciting world. And it sort of slowly filters out at scale to growers all the time. But if you're in like that extreme high budget range, there's some really cool stuff that we'll talk about in a minute here. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, so this is the type of light that I use. So right now I talked about like lights getting produced at scale. So the current market is you have Samsung producing these LEDs that I show on the bottom, right? And then you have manufacturers in the US or overseas. They are putting a bunch of these diodes into an array on like a metal plate. And then that metal plate gets powered by, there's a little power brick you can see at the top there. That's going to be like the power brick on like your Xbox or your laptop or whatever. So it's taking the current at the wall and it's throwing the correct number of watts into that LED array. Okay, so these are the kind of lights that I would generally recommend like across the board if you want to move past the blur bulbs, which are not a bad option either. But so a lot of times these drivers can be sold separately, just so we know that. And the drivers, you can get larger wattage sized ones or smaller wattage sized ones. And a lot of times they'll have a dimmer as well. So you can, so for example, like I bought a larger sized driver and then I hooked it up to 2 lights, right? So or you can buy a larger wattage size and just push more light intensity out of those LEDs. So you're in control with the driver. I also like adjust the dimmer knob all the time when I'm tinkering with my plants. So if you do buy a separate driver, check out HLG's website. They have a lot of great resources. That's Horticulture Lighting Group. And they will give you guides on what size driver to buy if you do it separately. So I did the DIY route that you can kind of see at the right. I bought these arrays of lights, and then you stick them on a heat sink, and then you wire the lights up to the driver, and then the driver plugs into the wall. It's DIY, but it's very easy. You won't blow yourself up. Just contact me or check out the purchase list, and you'll see what I have laid out for you. So what I recommend and what is in my tent right now, if you want the cheapest of these Samsung diodes, what we call quantum boards, the industry has called them that. What I'm going to recommend, and is on the purchase list, is an HLG QB96 light engine, and it's with it. You buy the combo with a heatsink, so that combo with a heatsink is $69, and then you're going to buy a Meanwell driver, that is another $60, and that's going to push 269 watts for like $130. So that's like, if you buy and go the DIY route, you can be saving like $200 over like a comparable light if we kind of go with the purchase list that I've broken down for you guys. And if you have trouble wiring your light up, contact me. If you want to go the DIY route and you're kind of nervous about it. I bought one of these with the driver included, the non-DIY. It's a lot more expensive. There's also people buy these on Alibaba sometimes and get them sent over from overseas. That is a good way to save money, but you're not going to have a warranty, and you're not going to have any kind of as much quality assurance or assurance that you are pushing the number of watts you think you are. So when it comes to electronics, I personally don't go for that, but there's a lot of folks who do, to great success. So this is the highest end of lights here. So what you'll see coming down to us regular folks are lights that are in bars. So you get a little bit less heat retention there, and less heat always means more efficiency in electronics. So like air can go in between the bars. So the other thing that the bars are doing is, we're going to talk about this in a minute, but the bars give you even lighting through your grow, as opposed to like a cone where it's like very bright in the middle and less bright as it extends. So there's companies like Photon Tech and Geek Beast and MyGrow that are making these high-tech bar types. And we have Science LED here, the Raging Kush. So what they're doing is they're making it so that your LEDs can change color across the spectrum, and you can pick out different parts of that spectrum as well. So what people do is they write a recipe in their iPhone app, and they'll say, I want sunset, I want sunrise, I want this light intensity, I want it to peak, I want it to drop off. So there's a lot of electronics there, and you definitely pay for it, but it's cool stuff.
Okay. Gil, hang on.
Yeah.
For someone like me who finds that kind of gadgetry cool,
mm-hmm.
Can you point to things where that's an advantage? Like what is that going to offer someone different than, the less expensive route?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it depends on how much you believe in this this sort of design by biomimicry, or like trying to, maybe not biomimicry, but trying to simulate like the natural environment. So if you have, if you're trying to get closer to simulating outdoor, this is going to help you with that. Let's see, I think it depends on how, if you are on the most cutting edge, there are things like a plant like expects to have a certain sunrise and sunset. Whereas in the tent, we're not necessarily doing that. I turn my lights on and off. So I would tell you guys to reach out to Hota Herb on Instagram. It's JOTAHERB. He has one of these Raging Kush lights, and I would ask him about it. It comes down to basically people say that you get a better expression of the plant's phenotype if it was bred for outdoor rather than bred for indoor. That's what I would say. I'm not super up on the latest light research in that regard. But yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. Oh, another thing I would say is we talked about like the blue light versus the red light, like the blue light causing like shorter like spacing between the leaves and you get like a denser plant. That's if I had one of these lights, that's what I would be doing. I'd be saying um, like oh my God, the plant is stretching too much. Let's crank up the blue and then you know slow down that stretch. So that's what I would do is I would just use it for like I guess you would say like plant structure reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, I guess, if you bought a light and you totally hated the spectrum, you might want that. That may be frustrating. I've had lights that are a little bit too blue, and I kept getting like kind of short plants. That's not too much of an issue though, unless you're like really particular, I think. Okay, so we're going to talk about like a rule of thumb here, which is going to be you're putting your purchase list together, and you know you have to fit you have to light a certain square footage of your grow area. So the rule of thumb is 50 watts per square foot of draw from the wall. So I'm going to tell you, if you get one of these blurples, they're going to say that they are 300 watts, and you're going to if you test it, it's going to be 160. That's how it is. They sell them to be, funny enough, a higher wattage number so that people think they're getting adequate light. But the solution is, even if the manufacturers are being a little dubious there, all you need to do is in a lot of places in Massachusetts, at least, we have these kilowatt devices that measure your watts of draw from the wall. So you just plug your light into the thing, into this device, you plug this device into the wall, you know how many watts you're pulling, you return it to the library, no problem. They're like 30 bucks on Amazon too. I like getting these things because they have a lot of cool features that I would suggest for you guys. Anyway, so we know that we need 50 watts per square foot from the wall. So the reason for that is because the cannabis plant can only uptake so much light per unit area. And basically, if you try to push it past that, it cannot handle the amount of photosynthesis required, and it will become unhappy. So we want like between 30 and 50 watts. I would shoot for 50. It's better to have too much than too little when you're in flower. Up to that 50 number, don't go past that. Okay. So if we have like a 2x4 grow tent, a 2 foot by 4 foot grow tent, that's 8 square feet. So you're gonna need 400 watts of total light draw from the wall. So if you're running a blurple, just keep in mind that like 15% of that is going towards powering those fans and drivers and stuff. So just keep that in mind. If you have any questions about this formula, definitely contact me. It sounds simple, but when you get into it, you might have a question here or there. So if you buy like one of these Samsung boards that I like, what I have, they're gonna have more reliable power ratings that you can trust. So you can just purchase it without testing it. Okay, so we're not going to go over all of this lighting information. Lighting is a very in-depth topic that I'm not an expert in. So what I'm going to do is direct you guys to mygrowlight.com in the bottom right there. And this guy, he basically, he gets lights, he puts them in a pretend grow room, and he measures their intensity throughout the grow room. So I'm going to warn you that there's a lack of data when you start getting into more technical metrics about light measurement. There's a lack of data. So manufacturers publish their numbers based on theoretical amounts. They're just going to take the amount of LEDs in that board and say, these LEDs put out this much light each. We have 100 of them. So it must put out 100 LEDs worth of light. It doesn't work that way. You're going to have hot spots, cold spots, etc. This guy will give you what you need to know. He may not have tested your light, but basically what he's doing is he's testing true photosynthetic light output, and he's comparing that to the wattage of draw. So yeah, so just check them out if you're curious. He has a formula here where he says, he talks about PAR, which is photosynthetically active radiation. So it's the amount of light that's in that spectrum that I showed you guys earlier, and it's weighted so for that spectrum. And he's saying, if we know that cannabis plants can take in 750 PAR, then he has a light planning tool for you. There's also, if you guys look up Dr. Bruce Bugbee or Apogee Labs on YouTube, this guy's a professor in Colorado, I believe, and then he has a light measuring company. So light is measured not in lux or lumens like your human lighting. Plants have their own spectrum, right? So it's weighted differently. Not as many people are interested in measuring this, so these meters are $250 to $500. Not in my budget, maybe not in your budget, but if you're interested, let me know. If you own a hydro store, for God's sake, you need to rent these out. Nobody's going to buy them. You need to rent them. Okay. So yeah, this is what the guy at MyGrow is using. He's using one of these, and then he's generating a map like you can see here. Yeah, you can see it. It's a complex topic, and it's has a little bit of a barrier of entry. But what we're going to do is, even though we have all these metrics and measuring devices, I get on, and a lot of folks get on just fine by checking in with how happy their plant is. Okay, so if we use that 50 watts per square foot as a start just for budgeting and buying things, then what we're going to do is we're going to dial them into your plant. So there's two ways to dial them in. Number one is going to be adjusting them, adjusting the height of your light. So everybody hangs these on little pulley systems that cost like $3 on the purchase list. And then the second method is by tuning a dimmer knob. So tuning the dimmer knob is going to be, I believe, more or less a 1-to-1 increase in light intensity. So it's going to be linear. Now, if you get your plant closer, because of the geometry of the situation that you can kind of see in this little graphic, if you get your plant closer, more of that light is going to, more of those photons are going to land on your plant. So it's going to, the closer you are, the intensity is going to go up with the square of the distance. So like if you get like a little bit closer, you're going to get like to the power of 2 more light intensity. So like if you were, okay, so if you were, let's say 20 inches away, and then you decreased it to 10 inches away, your light, you're going to go from like 2 units of intensity to like 4 units of intensity. So it's going to be not twice as much, but it's going to be the square, right? So the only reason I bring that up is because increasing the distance is going to be very significant. So you want to be very careful with changing the distance. However, your plant is constantly growing, right? So what I do is I always have a tape measure, and I'm always measuring the height as it grows of my plant canopy to my light. And you want that generally to be between 18 and 30 inches away, just so things don't get too hot. So what you can do is, like, as far as heat, just hold your hand, the back of your hand, parallel with your canopy. And then if that feels like too hot to you, or like a hot summer day, you're going to want to back your lights off to more like that 30-inch range than that 18-inch. Okay, so checking in with your plants. So they shouldn't be uncomfortably warm. Also, if your plants are overlit, what they're going to want to do is that the top leaves and the new growth is going to turn a light yellow. It's going to look kind of sickly, and it's also going to, the immediate reaction is the leaves, these long serrated leaves, are going to taco up, we call it. So there's less of an angle of incidence with that light. So it's kind of like doing its best to hide from the light because you're giving it too much. So if you have not enough light, what that's going to look like is your plant is going to be really lanky with long spaces between the leaf sets, and it's going to be slow growing. And then it can also get sickly from there. If you think you're running into that, though, just reach out and we'll take a look at your growth. Okay, so that's all the talk about light. It's very important. It's sort of the engine behind your plant's metabolism.
Gil, just a last point to sort of tie things together that we've talked about. So you were just talking about the distance between the canopy and the light, and before you were talking about the sort of spectrum of light. Are there resources out there that have looked into which changing the dimensions of which things yields what result?
Yeah, that's a good question. Changing the dimensions of things.
So like if you change the blue light, like what you said, you get leaf sets that are closer together. If you change red lights, you get something else. If you change the distance, you get something else. Has anybody looked into that science?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the distance is the distance, but what you're doing when you're adjusting this distance is you're also the number of photons that land on your plant are the number of photons on your plant. So the distance does not have as many like number of effects that come out of it. So essentially, you're trying to get the light in a good distance to your plant. You are also lighting the not just the canopy, but also the remainder of the plant. So there is different amounts of penetration there. So blue light, if you tune your spectrum to be more blue, you're going to have more penetration through the canopy because basically like the cannabis plant or like any plant like absorbs red light because like it's green, right? So it's like the opposite color. So blue, you get better penetration, and I believe that's the reason why you get that closer internodal spacing or distance between the leaf sets. And then red light, I remembered, helps with stem elongation. So if you have more red light, you're going to get kind of a taller plant going on. So like my Samsung boards, as sort of an added feature to fix up the spectrum, they throw in some red LEDs, just like one row of them out of like 200 or whatever. And that helps kind of get like a bigger kind of a plant. So a lot of people, will have different lighting spectrums for veg and for flower. So I believe, I may be mixing this up, but I believe like they tend to grow blue light to keep the plant short in veg and then red light in flower. If you look, so this is a good topic. So my HLG boards, I have, they call it a B spec and an R spec. So I always buy the R spec, which is red leaning rather than blue leaning, because the red is going to be better for flower. And whereas the more blue weighted spectrum is going to be better for veg. This is the spectrum we're talking about, this picture in the middle here. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. The spectrum is, so like we have this block on like cannabis research. Bruce Bugby is one of the only people researching cannabis and lights at like the university level in like a well-funded way. But there's a guy, just say like in North Andover, who runs tests. There's tons of tests on like lettuce, like tomatoes, different kind of plants and how they react to things. So that's definitely like the research is there and established on that kind of light spectrum. But then stuff like far red and UVB is coming soon. Yeah, it's interesting stuff, I think. All right, so we'll get into HVAC here. So as a general rule, you want your plants to be between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and then 50% to 70% humidity. So what you want to do is get one of these hygrometers that I show here that has a highest reading and a lowest reading so that you can know how cold your plants are getting at night, stuff like that. And you want that range to be, you want the high and the low to be within that range that I just prescribed. If you are not, you may have a problem. So, okay. So oscillating fans. Everybody has an oscillating fan. You can see one on the plant cam there. Um, so I have one on the purchase schedule, but just get whatever one you want. It doesn't really matter. The important thing that it does is it breaks up your plant is going to tend to trap, because it's like a tree. It's going to tend to trap pockets of hot air and humidity. We don't want either of those, especially humidity. So it's going to break that little pocket or like a boundary layer on the leaves. It's going to break that. It's going to bust through that so that it keeps your grow room in a consistent kind of temperature, because you don't want just like one cold pocket. That's not an efficient way to do things. And your plant, there's other benefits from getting fresh air. So, okay, humidifier. So I run a humidifier, don't really run a dehumidifier. I recommend this type here. There's like $10. This is what I'm using right now. You can also get ones that measure the humidity. That's cool too. If it has LEDs, cover those with duct tape. We don't want light leaks, so we don't like LEDs. So use duct tape. So I get one of these fogger mister things, and then I just plug it in to turn on like once every 3 hours with one of these light timer devices. If you're a grower, you're gonna have just like a lot of those light timer devices because we have our lights on a lighting schedule. So yeah, okay. So that keeps a good humidity. Space heaters, if you need a heater, I mean, I don't love the idea of it, but I have had to use it in the past. Get one that has a thermostat and then tune it against, not its own thermostat, but tune it against that hygrometer that I show there. So if it's showing too high, turn the thing down, okay? And vice versa. Don't aim it directly at your plants. You're gonna dry them out. Okay, so HVAC stuff. Okay, so we're gonna talk about inline duct fans. So I recommend to everybody, they're not paying me yet, but get at AC Infinity and use that promo code GROWCAST15. It's not my promo code either, so I'm not making any money. But what they do is if you have a tent or whatever, another sign of somebody growing is they have this like, they have this ducting, this like aluminum flexible ducting. So what you do is you put this fan in your tent, and then you have it pipe out the hot air through this ducting. So it kind of plugs into the ducting and it pipes out hot air. So the AC Infinity T6 is what you want. It's like $150, but it's amazing because it has a temperature and humidity sensor. So it kicks on the fan if it gets too hot or humid, or if it gets too cool. So what it's doing is it's going to bring in fresh air. So another accessory that you can use with this inline system is a carbon filter. So, you know, unless you just like the smell, get one of these. So it's gonna reduce the smell by, I can guarantee 80%. For me, it's 100%, but you know, maybe your plants are danker than mine, who knows? So for cooling, air conditioning is gonna be a last resort because it's an inefficient thing, but sometimes you need it if your ambient temperature is over 75 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. You want to run it outside of your grow tent or whatever, because it exhausts hot air. So you're just going to be shooting yourself in the foot if you put it in your tent. Same thing with dehumidification. You don't want to, I prefer to use that AC Infinity fan up until a certain point at which, you know, and then you use a dehumidifier if you need it. It adds heat as well because it's a compressor. So you want to have that outside of your tent. And then it's going to sort of condition the air around your tent, and it's going to get sucked in by the fan. So this is what a fan setup is going to look like. So a lot of times you have vents in the bottom of your tent, and that's going to allow cold air to be drawn in, and because the fan is piping out air. So it's going to create like negative pressure. So it's going to get sucked in and blown out. So everything gets sucked in through this carbon filter here. It goes through the fan, and then the fan jets it outside. So it's not smelly. and it's on the top of the tent, so it's taking the hot air out of the top of the tent, blowing it outside. So we want that for, it's going to mitigate mold and mildew. It's going to get more fresh carbon dioxide for your plants. It's a great thing. So I would definitely go with this kind of a system. Okay, so that's it for HVAC. So we'll talk about nutrients now. We'll pivot. Why do you need nutrients? So a lot of soil. So first of all, you want to be using a cannabis-specific soil if possible. There's a number of reasons that we'll talk about. So unless you're using what is called specifically a water-only super soil, if you're not using that, every other soil, you're going to want to add nutrients eventually. So during the seedling stage, you don't need to add anything, but during mid and late veg, you're going to see that your plant's running out of nutrients, especially say like nitrogen, that you're going to want to supplement. We'll talk about nutrient specifics, like the certain elements that you need in presentation 4, but basically nutrients are going to get you a larger plant with a better yield so that you don't run out of runway with the amount of nutrients in your soil. You keep pumping this guy up so you get big buds at the end. So for conventional nutrients, I'm going to recommend Megacrop. Hit them up for a sample for your first grow. There's General Hydroponics Trio. A lot of folks like that. It's just 3 different bottles that vary depending on what stage of growth you're in. And then I like Nectar for the Gods, not truly organic, but organic minded. Hit them up for a sample as well. The shipping is expensive, but it's worth it if you want to go with them. So for dry amendments, I like Gaia Green has a 444. I run Down to Earth BioLive, or their vegetable garden, which is a 444. And then I always recommend supplementing with local worm castings if you have access to it. You can't go wrong with worm castings. Okay. So if we're using these bottled nutrients, what do we have to think about here? What are our considerations? So it's going to get a little technical here, but if you're using bottled nutrients and then you're combining it with your local water, we don't know what the pH is going to be. So the pH is the measure of how acidic or basic things are. So something like a lemon is going to be acidic, and then something like baking soda is going to be basic. So that's measured from, I believe, 1 to 14 scale. So what's going on is your plant roots do a cation exchange. So your plant roots are interested in the potential of hydrogen, the pH. So they can only uptake certain nutrients at certain pHs. So what you need to know is you need to be in this optimal range of 6.3 to 6.8. Like at all times. So I'll run down how this is going to work in real life. So if you go with the General Hydroponics Trio, you're going to take, say, like a tablespoon of a few things, and you're going to mix it into like 2 gallons of water. And that's going to be your fertigation mix, right? But you can't water your plants with that straight up. You need to pH it. So just like you might pH like a pool or something like that, you are going to take a couple drops of pH up, which is like a strong base, or a pH down, which is a strong acid, to move that number in the direction that you want. So what you're going to do, you mix those things, and then you're going to take a reading with this pH pen device. I prefer the pens. They also have those paper strips. I like to be pretty precise with pH, so you can go with the paper strips to start with, but there's some benefits of the pen. So this is from Blue Lab. It's $90. It's one of the more expensive pens, but it's extremely reliable. Okay, so what we're doing, so we're going to add these few drops until our solution reads between 6.3 and 6.8, somewhere in that range where the plant can uptake those nutrients. So if we were outside of that range, the plant would not only not able to be to uptake those nutrients that we put into that water, so that would be a waste, but it would also not be able to take in any nutrients from the soil, because If you've blown out your soil pH, then your plant is going to go into lockout and it's not going to be able to uptake anything. And it may die, you may be able to save it. But we'll talk about that in the common issues next webinar. Okay, so we talked about pHing your fertigation. You also need to pH your soil if you're growing in soil or cocoa or whatever. So what you do with that is, so you're making sure that the plant where it's sitting is also in a nice pH. So the watering is in a nice pH, and then where it's sitting in the soil is a nice pH. So all you need to do is you take like an ounce of soil from the root zone, an ounce of distilled water, mix that up. It's called a slurry test, and then you dip your pen in there, and it's going to tell you if your pH is in a good range or if it's not. Now, how do we adjust that soil pH? You have a plant in there. You can't just dump like lime in it or something. Okay, so how do you mess with that? So what you're going to do is, remember back when we talked about the fertigation pH, you have an allowable range of 6.3 to 6.8. So let's say your soil pH is really low and you need it to come up. So you're going to want to fertigate with closer to the 6.8 end of the range, so that your soil pH will creep up over a few waterings, and then you can bring your fertigation pH back into like the middle of that range. Okay, so yeah, so if you choose to go the dry amendment route rather than these bottled nutrient approach, okay, so you're just going to be watering, right? You're not going to be adding like liquid nutrients, but your water, you still do need to pH it. This is not an optional step. I know like some folks will say, oh, the microbiology will take care of it. I would not trust that. Okay, so just like the water, so if you're pHing your water, you're just gonna add a couple drops of the pH up or the pH down. You can use whatever brand, and you're gonna take that measurement. And then once it's in that range, you're good. So you're still gonna monitor your soil pH over time as well. That's super critical because that's where your plant's getting all of its nutrients from the soil area. Okay, so your dry amendments. So how do you use them? So you're going to mix it, I'm going to say broadly, mix it according to the manufacturer instructions. But keep in mind your starting soil. So if your soil you know to have a lot of nutrients, or to advertise, or you've spoken with folks and you say that it runs very hot, meaning it has a lot of nutrients in it already, definitely don't overdo it. Definitely go towards the lower end of the manufacturer instructions. You can also run that slurry test, that soil slurry test with the 1 ounce of soil and the 1 ounce of water. You can also run that before you put any plant in at all. And if you find that a lot of times fertilizers are acidic and you need to bring up that soil pH, you can add a little bit of dolomite lime to get things back where they need. But run a little test batch before you mix a big batch of soil. Okay, so eventually, when you're doing these dry amendments, eventually your plant is going to consume all of that what you've mixed into your big batch of soil, right? So what you do then is you top dress a little bit of that same dry amendment. Probably like 2 or 3 months in, you may see a slight nutrient deficiency coming in with your plant. So you're going to mix in what the manufacturer recommends for top dressing specifically. And then you'll work that in with your fingers, and then you water it in, and those nutrients will get worked into the soil. For Veg and Bloom, we top dress again with phosphorus or potassium. A lot of folks call like a product called Papa's Perfect Poop, widely recommended. And then if you're running into calcium or magnesium issues, we have in Massachusetts a local rock dust called Stone Dust. They have a micronized product that I've had a lot of good success with. All right, so if you've decided to go the super soil route, you don't want to deal with nutrients at all. You're saying like, I want to keep it simple. I totally respect that, and I think that is a great option for beginner growers. Or if you want to use my living cocoa mix, the same advice will apply. So water pH, you still need to pH your water. You still need to check your soil pH over time. Now, when it comes to re-adding more nutrients to the soil, what a lot of folks do is they leave room at the top of their pot and you just add more soil. So just add like an inch or two of fresh soil to the top, mix it in. When it comes to if you want to get more of the phosphorus and potassium that we need during flower, you want to again go with that Papa's Perfect Poop. It's an organic option, so it's not going to like totally blow out your nutrient profile. Let's see. So when you're using, if you're doing this dry amendment route, or if you're using the super soils, you're going to need to plan ahead. So you're going to need to, when you top dress, you're going to, it takes a couple of weeks for the top dressing to break down. So you need to be thinking ahead of time. So that's one of the reasons why people like the bottled nutrients, because they can apply quick, high concentrations of nutrients and they can kind of pivot more quickly. It's what a lot of folks go with for their first run, even if it's like potentially a less sort of organic type of option. Okay, so we will come up to the last portion here. We'll talk about getting ready to flip to flower. So we've been going through the stages of growing your plants. So these are my little autoflowers towards the end of flower. So they've stretched a bit. This sour stomper has a little bit of that kind of OG structure. So it's a little bit leggy and kind of more golf ball shaped nugs. But so basically when you want to flip when your plant is about 1 foot to 1.5 foot tall. You don't have to be on a strict schedule. So when you flip, you're going to take that light timer, and instead of running it for 24 hours, your lights, or 18 hours or whatever, you're going to set that to 12 hours. So it's on for half the day. Okay, so that's going to signal your plant to start budding. And so a couple weeks in, you're going to start seeing pre-flowers, and then after that, you'll start to produce buds. So after you flipped, a few weeks in, your plant is going to go in early flower through this enormous stretching period. So your plant may double, or worst case triple, in height. So what you want to do is plan for that. So you want to take your total tent height or your total closet height or whatever, and we'll say it's like 6 feet, right? But you only really, in my case, have 4 feet of total plant space, because I have a foot for the pot on the bottom, and then I have a foot for light headroom, and then that 18 inches of minimum light distance that we talked about. So I really have more like 4 feet of space for my plants to potentially fill. So if we work backwards and we take that 4 feet and we divide it by the worst case scenario of tripling the plant, so we divide that 4 feet by 3, you can see that you want to flip when you're about like a foot tall. Now, so that's why in veg you want to focus on horizontal growth and filling up to 75% of that canopy space, of that total area, rather than like getting a really tall plant, because you're just going to get an even taller plant. So you want to watch out for that. Okay, so the other thing you want to do before flipping to flower is I like to take the chance to remove the lower branches. So the stragglers there that aren't getting up to the canopy, that are in like the bottom third of growth, you want to clip them off. They're not going to help you. They're just going to make little popcorn-sized buds, and it's going to pull resources away from your big buds. So it's not good. So if you can, I would just remove them. Don't remove over like 20% of vegetative growth, but yeah. Also, your plant's going to start smelling like in early flower. So have that carbon filter planned for your flower stage. Okay, so even if you bought feminized seeds like I recommended, or if you bought regular seeds, you may get hermaphrodites, you may get male plants if you have regular seeds. So people are always asking, like, is this a male? Is this a male? Okay, so you need to have an eye for it. I started out growing regular seeds, so I kind of know what they look like in person. But up here, you can see on the left is a male plant and the right is the female plant. These are the pre-flowers. So these are kind of like, as your plant's going through puberty, it's going to start showing like reproductive organs. So on the left, so what the male pre-flower looks like. So these are not like the full flowers, but these are just like it's starting to show. So on the left, you see there's what we call like a little flag there. There's just like a little piece of tissue that the blue arrows are pointing to. And then behind that is going to be your reproductive part. So on the left, it's going to be, there's a little stalk, and then there's a round pollen sac there. So you can catch the males when they're very small just by distinguishing that pollen sac from the female, which is a pointier with no stalk and potentially a white pistil hair you may see. So it's like a pointy kind of teardrop shaped thing, whereas the male is more kind of round. There's a slight point to it, but it's more round. So yeah, we want the females, we don't want the males. All right, yeah, so that is it for today's webinar. Let's see, so we have one question here that I'd like to answer. So we were talking about lights. Okay, so is there a way to reduce the stress in the plant where you run out of vertical growth space in the grow area without a dimmer? There are a few options to reduce the stress in with your plant. You can try to mitigate the heat. So a lot of the stress is coming from the heat. If it is coming towards over lighting, you can still do some low stress training in flower where you'll get like a wire, or they have these yo-yo devices, Google that, but where you'll pull down that top bud or the top few buds so that they kind of like bend a little bit more sideways. There are crazier things that you can do that we'll talk about later in webinar 4. But that's going to be your answer. You can also, I've been kind of thinking about experimenting with this. You can kind of pivot to a little bit more side lighting if you have the capacity to angle your lights and move them away from your plant, more kind of on the side. That may help, but if the thing is stretching, you actually want to turn the intensity up so that it doesn't get that tall. So I said if they're underlit, your plant's going to get lanky. But we also know that it goes through this explosive growth in flower. So one thing I want to mention is you want to be turning your lights. So in early veg, you're going to have them dimmed and closer to 3 feet away. In flower and in late flower, you're going to have those guys cranked up all the way closer to that 18-inch mark. So that's going to reduce the amount that it's stretching. So it's going to bring that explosive growth. It's going to decelerate it a little bit. And I like personally closer spaces between the leaf sets and between the bud sets, because you get these kind of big colas that kind of grow together and they look cool and they're nice to have in your jar. Yeah, there we go. Let's see. All right. So I'm going to run upstairs. I'm going to turn off my presentation. Let's see. Oh, actually, okay, so next seminar, I'll let you guys know what you're in for number 404. So we're going to talk about common issues. That's pH problems and how to fix them, nutrient excesses, overwatering, pests, and then how to manage pests in a efficient way through IPM. We'll talk about when you want to harvest. I need to update this slide, but we're going to talk about when to harvest, how to time that, how to get your plants at the perfect point of ripeness. That's something as home growers we have an advantage on. We'll talk about the drying and curing stage. So some people say that's half the battle, is drying and curing your plants after your plants are dead and you have the buds in the jar. And then we'll talk about some advanced topics. I'll kick those off so you guys can start getting an idea about them. So they're going to be defoliation, VPD, having a continuous harvest setup where you're always harvesting every few months, super cropping, how to clone plants. I'll talk about the soil food web and synthetic nutrients versus more natural inputs, how to test your buds if you're interested in that, making concentrates. So I just harvested all those autoflowers and I'm going to turn them into some concentrates. So like some hash, some RSO, that kind of thing, some keef. And then we'll also talk about energy efficiency, which I think is important because we're growing inside. Okay, all right. So yeah, I'll mute myself and run upstairs and we'll check out the plant real quick and we'll talk about the plants there.
All right. So I hope you guys can hear me. Great. So this is the Panama pupil plant so I vegged this simultaneous as I grew the autoflowers because the autoflowers are not light period dependent. They're not photoperiod dependent. So also a vegging plant is not photoperiod dependent. So what I did was I just figured I'll throw in an extra plant there. So we'll kind of preemptively get the next run growing. So this guy's been in this pot for like 80 days. So it's gotten fairly big. I haven't done a ton of plant training on it. I currently have it in the living cocoa blend. And I'm running the blue mats. So the blue mats do the automatic irrigation. And then we have all the nutrients just in that cocoa. So it's basically a kind of a dry amendment route. The cocoa can be continuously irrigated. So you can always be adding water to it without any risk of overwatering your plant, because what it does is it maintains air pockets throughout so that your plant isn't going to drown. The roots aren't going to drown and get and rot. So you can always add water to it. So I think it's a really great technology that we have access to. So this is the hygrometer that I suggest getting for yourself. Very cheap, and it shows my highs and lows for temperature on there. So you can see I have a little probe hanging here by the plant, and this probe also reads the temperature and humidity, and I put it right by the canopy there. And as the humidity goes up or the temperature goes up, this duct fan, let's see if we can see that there, that duct fan that's on the top of the tent here is going to kick on and get more air circulating. And then, yeah, so this is the light that I recommend here, very good value. And these are all the Samsung cords. And then those are the drivers hanging in the back. So this is going to be transplanted soon and flowered out. I know I said I was going to take clones of it, but I changed my plans. This is my little humidifier guy here. I really like using these. Anyway, so that's an overview. By next webinar in about a month, hopefully we'll be you'll see this plant flowering. I know it is kind of borderline about whether it's going to fit in the tent, but we'll see. And I'm going to be putting it in that earth box, so that's going to be really cool. So I'm experimenting with having one enormous plant. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's about it for tonight. But thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you for watching on YouTube.
Yeah.
And all right, we'll see you next month.
Thanks a lot, Gil. Yep, everybody's thanking you from the chat room. We'll look forward to the next one. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Have a good night.
Bye for now, everyone. You too.